Part of the reason why I'm happy to share my story is because going through that birth trauma really leaves a mark. And sometimes it's hard to move past that and think that you're not going to end up with the same experience, and just knowing that it's possible. And if you just put your heart and your soul into it and have faith in yourself and whatever faith, you believe in, that it can be done. And, you are strong enough to do it.
Getting pregnant and giving birth are two of the most exciting things you can ever hope to experience in this life. The moment you think you could be pregnant, you're frantically searching for all the best information, which is why you're here today. I'm Stephanie King, and with my many years of experience as a professional childbirth educator, doula, and lover of all things pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, I'm here to make preparing for your birth enjoyable, empowering, and totally easy. Each week, I'll cover different topics, interview professionals, and get into the nitty-gritty birth stories from mamas just like you. And when you're ready for more, you can join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I take you step by step through exactly how to prepare your mind, body, spirit, and partner for a birth you love. So let's get started. Our reviewer of the week is Sadie.Phillip, and she says, birth stories are the best. I am 33 weeks pregnant with my first, and I've always wanted to have an unmedicated birth, but I didn't know all that much. Now, after lots of birth classes and podcasts like this, I have been able to clear all my fear about birth, and I feel excited for my birth. Crazy to think I feel excited for something so many people are scared of. I recommend your podcast to everyone. Thank you so much, Sadie. And we have another birth story here with us today. These are definitely the favorites. So I love that we get to do this. And we have a special guest. We have Dad, which is my absolute all-time favorite. So with that, will you guys take a moment and introduce yourselves and say hi to everybody?
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Samantha.
And I'm Matt. Nice to meet you guys.
And tell us a little bit about where you're from, how many kids you have, all of that kind of stuff.
We're from Wilmington, Delaware, and we have 2 beautiful children.
Oh, that's exciting. Okay, so this birth story that we're telling today is about your second. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. All right. So with that, Samantha, the first thing I like to do is kind of dive into the pregnancy. So tell me a little bit about this pregnancy, even maybe how it was different or the same from your first pregnancy, and then anything that happened along the way.
Well, my pregnancy with my son was a lot different than my first pregnancy with my daughter in a lot of ways, physically, emotionally, mentally. To be honest, during my first pregnancy, I was very excited. I loved being pregnant. And not that I didn't love being pregnant with my first or with my second, it's just different. You're busier. It goes by faster. And everything was fine in terms of, the pregnancy. I was doing fine. He was growing well. When I got to about 28 weeks, I was diagnosed with gestational diabetes, which was different from my first. And from my first experience, I had a lot of trauma from my daughter's birth. So going into the second pregnancy, I had a lot of anxiety, just a lot of stress, worry. So that kind of overshadowed the joy that I felt a lot during the second pregnancy.
Are you willing to share anything about your first, why it was traumatic, or kind of, I just think other moms that are listening might be curious and then wonder how you handled it moving into that second?
So a lot of the reason why I decided to go and take this course was because of my experience with my first. I ended up being diagnosed with severe preeclampsia around 37 weeks, just before 37 weeks of my daughter, and basically had to be induced that night. My blood pressure was really high. They had found protein in my urine, so it was all very fast and sudden. Up until then, I hadn't had any issues, and then it just kind of came on, and then it was like full speed ahead. And yeah, the delivery was rough. I was in labor for 36 hours. I wasn't dilated at all. So I had to have the Foley bulb. I was on magnesium. a bunch of different other medications. My blood pressure was up and down. I was constantly being monitored every 5 minutes. It was very stressful. There were bits and pieces of it that I actually don't remember, just from being so overly medicated. By the time I actually was ready, well, I had gotten the epidural with her probably around 5 centimeters, not because I couldn't handle the pain, but because I was just so tired. I had been awake for 24 hours at this point with no rest. And it's like, how am I gonna get this baby out if I haven't had any rest? Like this, I'm exhausted. And then that ended up dropping my blood pressure too low. So then we had to, lower it. And it was really hard.
We also had our child during COVID too, so that was kind of to top it off.
So he was the only one that could be there with me. I had no other support people, so it was a lot on him too. He was told, I don't remember this, but he was told that I could not have a C-section, or they would strongly advise against it because I probably wouldn't survive.
Yeah, so that's some trauma that you brought from your first into your second. You're okay.
Again, I don't remember that being said. I don't know if I was, just not with it, or I don't know. But yeah, it was a lot. I ended up either developing pneumonia or pulmonary edema as well during my delivery, from all the fluid that I had in my body. They weren't exactly sure which it was. It wasn't clear in my chart when I went back later and discussed it with the doctors. So yeah, because of that, they, diagnosed me with a severe preeclampsia.
And that's why she couldn't go through with the C-section, because of all the fluids that would have been up. It would have been a major risk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow. So, I mean, can I ask your husband, how was that for you?
I was in the middle of COVID, and I still felt like I was like an 18-year-old kid. And here I am, a 30-year-old man. And I'm like, no one's coming. This is it. Like, you got to be there, dude. You got to get it ready. You got to get together. But in the meantime, I'm terrified. I'm absolutely terrified. I'm frustrated. And I'm looking at, essentially two human beings that I just want to be healthy and safe. I just want to bring them home and get started with our lives. That was that woke me up. That, right there, that was like, all right, man, you gotta really step up and get to yourself. But, I think for me, it was more about just keeping my, eyes focused on her. It was terrible for me to hear, but for her to have to go through it, that's who I cared about at that moment. So really, the focus sort of just shifted from that moment to, this is really about being a dad now and being a father and a husband. And, it just, it put life into a bigger perspective for me. I knew I had to do a lot of different things as far as taking care of her and watching out for her. There's stuff I was like, wait, this is like a thing? This is real? I'm like, oh, okay. I guess we got to figure that out now. So, all right, But, once Vivian was born, I really got into it. I was, really, really excited that she was here. We could, start to live our lives a little bit together and, kind of come together. And I really liked, the hospital part of it too. Well, minus that portion of it, getting involved and actually understanding a lot more of it from the course too. That actually really helped kind of putting the puzzle pieces together.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing because we don't talk about it like we used to, I guess, as a community, and we don't see it. And the way that it happens in the hospital, you don't know until you're already there. So it can be kind of tricky. And I'm glad to hear that, because that's that's the part, like for my husband too, like he can relate, I think husbands a lot, this is what we hear. And being able to understand those things, like you have to understand birth. You have to, and you don't know that though. But if you don't, then, and you go in blind, then it can be really scarring and scary. But when you have those tools, then you can kind of walk through and make decisions together and feel a little bit more on top of it. So,
right. And just to piggyback off that, we did go into it blind. Honestly, I was scared of birth. I didn't want to know anything about it. I didn't want to think about it happening. I obviously knew baby had to come out somehow, but I was terrified. I just, was like, oh, people do this every day, like it'll be fine. I'll be fine. I don't need to watch it. I don't need to know about it. I just am going to go in and yeah, it'll be good. So I didn't prepare myself the first time around and was definitely not prepared for any of that.
But I mean, here in kind of what we were saying earlier, we didn't have that time. We had no choice. We were, not we, she was robbed of that, a lot, both of us were. Because, I mean, I'm sitting at work and I get a phone call saying, my blood pressure's high. We're going to have a phone call tonight. Okay, I'm going home. So, I mean, I get in the car, I'm going home and I'm just like, hey, are we going to go have a baby? They were like, no, we got to wait for a bed. And I was like, oh, wait, yeah, no, they got to schedule it. I was just like, oh, all right, well, now I'm home. So that's a good thing. But I mean, for the most part, like, I'm like, dude, I just got the phone call in my life. Like, we're going to have a kid now. Wow. Like, I did not get ready for that. Like, next 2 weeks, I would have been ready. But like, we were still living our lives as just husband and wife. We weren't ready for that yet.
Well, thank you both for sharing that and sharing your experience because you're not alone. And so for moms that are listening, couples that are listening, like you're not alone. And I can relate to that. I mean, we even took hospital classes. I was curious about birth. I wanted to do it unmedicated, if you know a little bit about my story. But I too went in blind and I had a similar experience in the sense that like nothing that I had planned for or wanted happened. And I came out the other side going, whoa, I need to know a lot more. Anyways, and that's what we get to do today, right? We get to educate all these mamas together and tell them what's up. So I love that. Okay, so let's go back to this current pregnancy then. Things are pretty chill, but at 28 weeks, you said you were diagnosed with gestational diabetes. Really quick, were you planning to give birth in a hospital again, home birth? What kind of provider did you have?
I was planning to give birth in a hospital. With my history of the severe preeclampsia, I was already considered high risk. So I worked with not only my OB, but high risk providers as well. So I was monitored a lot more closely the second time around. And I made sure of that. I wasn't taking any chances of, it happening again. Once you develop preeclampsia the first time, the risk of it happening again is higher. So I wanted to make sure that I had a team of people that were going to know my history and, watch me very closely this time around. I just felt safer delivering in a hospital, considering what I had been through the first time.
So did you have the same provider, the same OB that you had for your first birth?
I did. Yep. Yeah.
Awesome.
I trust them very much, obviously, with my life because they saved it. And my daughters, too. So they were great, great providers. And before we decided to conceive our son, I had reached out to them and I asked for the referral to the high-risk providers. I wanted to speak with them specifically to understand how they would monitor me more closely during second pregnancy. I wanted to get all the information and education I could before we made a decision. Am I going to have another baby or not? And ultimately, I heard from them. I felt comfortable with what they were saying in terms of how I would be monitored. And I just decided, yes, there's trauma there, but I didn't want to let fear stop me from what I wanted. And I had to have faith in myself that I could do it.
So with that, at 28 weeks, tell me a little bit about what changed or how you managed that moving forward.
When I was diagnosed with gestational diabetes?
Yes.
Once you get diagnosed with gestational diabetes, it felt, to some, I think it feels like the world is ending because, you have to be very, very controlled, very disciplined. And I was, I think at that point, I was just kind of in the mentality where I just wanted to stay positive. And, I kept telling myself, the entire time throughout the pregnancy, I can only control so much. I'm taking care of myself as best I can. I'm exercising. I'm doing the, 3 exercises that was mentioned in the course, some additional exercising that's pregnancy safe. I'm watching my nutrition. And then, ultimately things happen sometimes that are out of our control. And, sure, it was hurtful to get the diagnosis because I had been working so hard to avoid any complications with this pregnancy. But, it was one more thing that was out of my control, and I just had to keep going. And so, yeah, it was difficult. I had to test myself 4 times a day. I had to really watch what I ate, limit carbs. I couldn't eat fruit, only in the afternoon, just different things. And it was a trial and error period. There were things that a lot I had to learn, like I would eat something and think, okay, this is great for me. And then realize, no, it's not. It just spiked your sugars, really high. So it was a trial and error period and frustrating at that, but I just tried to stay positive and just kept going.
Yeah. Did it affect anything as you got later in pregnancy? Were you able to keep it in check with diet? And what happened towards the end there?
I was diet controlled for a good amount of time. Up until I was around 36 weeks, my fasting numbers were a little bit higher than what they wanted to see. Not incredibly high, but just a bit over to where they mentioned I recommended being placed on insulin. So I was put on insulin, 4 units at bedtime. So at 36 weeks. So it wasn't for very long. And it did help control my fasting sugars. And then because of that, I had to be monitored more with the high-risk doctors. So I was undergoing stress tests 3 times a week on top of, seeing the OB for weekly appointments. So it was a lot of doctor's appointments.
Yeah. So you were with an OB and you were with maternal fetal medicine?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Got it. And did you have a good experience with maternal fetal medicine?
Yes, I did. Yeah. I felt comfortable there. It was just nice to have some more eyes on me, to make sure everything was going okay, that I was okay, that baby was okay. And I did have a good experience with them.
So Matt, let's jump into kind of asking you a little bit about birth partner support. So I'm curious how you felt. So she was just talking about gestational diabetes and monitoring that and how helpful you were with the glucose and or the insulin and all of that kind of stuff throughout. And you're a paramedic, which I think was awesome. That's kind of helpful to have all that information. But I'm curious to know, this time around, a little bit different from the first, you had some information. What was kind of your favorite things or the really important things that you feel like would be helpful for other dads to hear too, that you took from this and you were able to utilize with her during pregnancy?
Sure. I think from the first time, a lot of the stuff kind of came back like very, very quickly to me. Not only that, a little bit of my, now that I actually had a little bit more of advanced training with birth, I kind of had a little bit of an upper hand too. So that also helped as well. But for dads who are just to the lay person, not really in the medical field, my biggest thing is that I will tell you right now, if the human race had to rely on the male species to reproduce, we'd be extinct. Period. End of sentence. Like, that's it. These ladies have the ball. So just listen. That's your biggest thing, is just listen. And sometimes it's hard to do because they want you to kind of give that give and take. Yes, I know. They want you to give that give and take. They want you to be that support. But then there's other times where they just don't want you to talk. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Just listen to them. Hear what they need. And in all honesty, you just want to make sure that they are, they have all the things that they need. And also, too, being an advocate for them. Because sometimes And don't get me wrong, the nurses are terrific, and I'm not going to say that they're not, but sometimes you need to advocate a little bit more for them, stepping up for, some of their care, because if something's wrong with them and they're just not seeing it, and them better than anybody else, because you do, you're there, you guys are together. You need to speak up to the nurse and say something. We had an issue with, there was an issue with her being put on oxygen at the wrong level. Now, I knew that as a medical provider, but I could see her starting to struggle to breathe. And I said to the nurse, I said, no, we're not doing that. We need to change this from the masks to the nasal. And, thankfully we did that because she had it on the wrong setting. So, my biggest thing is too, making sure that you're that advocate as well.
All right. Will you tell me a little bit about your preparation that you did? So you talked about the birth course, but what were the things that you did? You said the 3 exercises. You mentioned some relaxation practice, some massage practice. What were kind of your daily things that you were making sure to hit every single day? And then those like weekly, monthly, what else did you add in that was really helpful?
So I did the 3 exercises mentioned in the course every day. It varied at different times of the day, depending. But I always made sure I got up earlier in the morning before my daughter would wake up, and I would do some form of exercise, whether it was 15 minutes, 30 minutes, just something, quick. But at least it was the way that I was moving my body. I always make sure to stay hydrated and, just watch what I ate. I mean, once I had the diabetes, I had to, but I had to be mindful of, just making sure I had the right nutrition. Like I mentioned earlier, I kind of went into it blindly the first time around. And so that was the driving force in taking this course and educating myself on how I can do it differently and what I can control to have a different pregnancy and a different outcome in terms of birth. So yeah, I really just made sure I stayed hydrated, ate right, and exercised every day.
That's awesome. I don't think that there's anything better you could do.
Yeah.
It's like perfect. That's
and
wonderful.
then, I remember listening to some birth affirmations and the Oceanside relaxation audio that you guys provide. And I would listen to that in the car, sometimes either going to work, or before I went to doctor's appointments if I was feeling anxious, so it kind of helped to continue my positive attitude and just to relax a little bit. I was very mindful especially going into doctor's appointments. I was always very anxious and nervous about my blood pressure specifically, because I was always waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah. Right.
And so, those kind of helped me regain focus and, just get a hold of the negative thoughts and racing thoughts and, center back into a positive mindset and just reaffirm me that things are going to be okay and that, I can do this.
How about coming up to the end of your labor? Was there anything that you did for preparation, like red raspberry leaf tea or evening primrose oil? Were you having any discussions with your providers about induction, or were they pretty lax on that? What did that look like?
Yeah, so because I was diagnosed with the gestational diabetes, maternal fetal medicine had mentioned that it would pose more of a risk for me to go past 39 weeks. So they were talking about induction. I was scheduled to be induced July 29th. And then I ended up asking them to postpone it a little bit longer because it was going to be with a provider that I didn't know. It was another provider that was working that day, and it wouldn't have been with somebody from my practice. And I didn't necessarily feel comfortable with that just because, I was high risk and, I wanted somebody that was familiar with me, familiar with my history. So they ended up pushing it to July 31st, and it was going to be at night. Thankfully, though, he decided to come naturally on his own on July 31st in the morning. So
that's awesome.
I didn't have to be induced, which I was very happy about because I really didn't want to be. I didn't want to be induced. Just from my memories of what had happened the first time, I was very nervous about being induced again. And I didn't want it. I didn't want all that intervention. I wasn't dilated at all up at that point. So, I had to listen to what they were telling me. But thankfully, it didn't end up happening that way.
Yeah. So, and did you do anything to help things along, or were you just let it go?
I mean, I walked a lot. I was very determined to get him out as much as I could. We tried other things, like sex and I walked a lot in the mornings, mostly just, tried things all day. I didn't have any tea or oils, but, I think I was doing certain exercises that would help. I focused a lot on breathing to prepare, doing things like my J breath or making nice low vowel sounds to kind of practice, for contractions and things like that. So I did a lot of that also.
All right. So let's talk about your birth. Walk me through from that very first contraction all the way to giving birth.
Okay. So like I mentioned, I was scheduled to be induced on July 31st that night. And around 2:30 in the morning, I felt what I thought was my water breaking. And I got up and I was like, oh, my water broke. It's time to go. Now, from my first birth, I didn't go through anything naturally. So this was all new to me. So we had our bags packed. We waited for somebody to come. I started having contractions about every 4 minutes apart. I was, bouncing on my birth ball, relaxing, doing my breathing. And then off we went to the hospital. And that continued. I was doing well. And then we got to the hospital and they tested to see if it was my water or potentially my mucus plug. And they said it was my mucus plug. It wasn't my water breaking yet. And so they would monitor me for 2 hours. And if things didn't progress, they were going to send me home. Now, in my mind, I'm panicking because I'm like, oh no, I don't want to go home like this. And, have my daughter be bouncing around like, mama this and mama that. And, as I'm contracting and in pain. And I didn't want to risk being induced because, like I said, I didn't want that to happen. So I'm like, all right, things better move along quicker. So, of course, everyone's telling me, well, things go along a lot faster when you have your second, this and that. So I'm like, okay, good. Because it was really long the first time. So yeah, about an hour as I was being monitored, in the hospital, my water broke. So I was like, okay, here we go. And so when my water broke, there was actually some meconium that came out with it. So I had to be, more closely monitored with that. So, from there, it just really, it progressed quickly. I was about 2 centimeters when I went into the hospital that morning. By about 4 a.m., I was probably around 5 centimeters. So things were moving really fast. And then from there, I just skyrocketed to 9 centimeters like that. And you could tell. Yeah, like I said, the first time around, I was very heavily medicated. So things just felt different. All of this was new for me. So everything was happening naturally. I didn't have any of the medication I had the first time. I really, really focused on my breathing. My husband, Matt, and my mom was there as well. They were really my rock. I was having some back labor pains also. So, I was holding on to my husband and we were rocking back and forth, like doing the slow dance. And then my mom was in back and she was, doing the hip press. And it was, I was so thankful to have both of them there, especially as, labor progressed. But yeah, by the time I got to 9 centimeters, I was in a lot of pain. I was. I just remember gripping on to my husband's sweatshirt he was wearing and I was just breathing. I'm like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. And, it's always people are coming in and they're talking to you and they're like, oh, do you mind if, so-and-so comes in and watches and you're in the middle of a, contraction. I'm like, I don't care. It's okay. I just want this baby to come out now. So yeah, things moved so super quick. He ended up being born at 8:43. So from 2:30 to 8:43, labor started, and then he was here. So it was really, really quick.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
quick. Even for a second baby, that's amazing.
Yes, I know. I know. Yeah. So, at one point I remember being in the transition phase, and when you're in it, it's hard to, think about all of these things, because you're trying to focus, you're trying not to concentrate so hard on the pain that you're feeling. So, I we had the music playing, the lights were dim. I had two people next to me, like coaching me. I remember saying, like, I can't do this. I'm like, no, you can do it. You're doing it already. I'm like, okay. And I would just tell myself, one more minute. So yeah, it really progressed. I pushed for 20 minutes, and he was here.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yes, much different
That's
from
really
the
neat.
first.
Yeah. How about as you were working through contractions and stuff, what were the things that were bringing you the most relief or that were the most helpful? Was it having those two people there kind of cheering you on? Were you rocking and swaying? Were they doing counter pressure? What did that look like?
Yeah, all of it. All of it was helpful. Just once the contractions got stronger, I was quiet. I wanted, I didn't want to talk. I just needed to breathe. And they were helpful, just kind of coaching me through. And like I said, the rocking was very helpful, standing up as much as I could, moving around in different positions. They were there to support me, massage my head or give me a wet cloth, when I started getting hot. Just all of it was helpful. Just having the support, having the faith in myself, that I could get through it, one more minute. And breathing was definitely helpful, just making those low vowel sounds. Like I said, I practiced, doing different things like ah or ooh, like what felt better for me. So like doing the lower pitch, like ooh, was like really helpful. Just kind of focusing on that.
Were there things that you were telling yourself over and over and over again during labor?
Yeah, just trying to stay positive. Like towards the end of my pregnancy, knowing that I had this induction date scheduled, I kind of prepared some different affirmations, and I actually got my daughter involved. I remember watching a video that you guys had in your course of mother's birth, and she had her kids surrounding her, and they all had posted affirmations around the room. So I thought, what a good idea it could be to help include her in this as well, since I can't bring her there with me. For obvious reasons. But, I just wanted her to be a part of it. And so we actually took time, maybe a few days before, a week before, we made crafts together. So I had a picture of her, and she had wrote on it or like drew on it. She was 3 at the time, so as best she could. But just wrote like "Go Mama" on it and some different things. So, I had my birth affirmations. I had her picture. So that was kind of like a focal point for me also. Like just thinking about her picture there and the birth affirmations I had.
How about Dad? What were the things that he did throughout your labor that were super helpful?
Yeah, I mean, he was there, the entire time. Like I said, just letting me do what I needed to do. Or if, he would try to massage, my head or my back or different things. And I would say, no, I don't like that. Like, let's do something else, stop doing that. He was just there, and he was my coach. He would say like, you got this, you can do this, just keep going. You got it. And just letting me, if I needed silence, he would be silent. If I needed to just hold on to him, he was just there to let me hold on to him. Just remembering my breathing, helping me remember my breathing, kind of doing it along with me. Yeah, just being a good coach.
Yeah, I love it. Anything else that you'd want to add before I ask you your favorite or best advice for moms and dads?
Well, I think, part of the reason why I'm happy to share my story is because, like I mentioned from the first time around going through that birth trauma, it really leaves a mark. And sometimes it's hard to move past that and think, that you're not going to end up with the same experience. And so just knowing that it's possible. And if you just, put your heart and your soul into it and have faith in yourself and whatever faith, you believe in, that it can be done. And, you are strong enough to do it.
Was there anything that you did or that was really helpful to work through kind of past trauma with this birth? Or was it the birth itself that was really healing? And was it really healing?
So after my daughter was born, I did seek out therapy for a little while to kind of, cope with what had happened. And then, I did some preparation myself, just talking with doctors and just really doing some reflecting of, of what I can control. And then really when my son was born in the second pregnancy, and just all the preparation, all the hard work, just being able to do it without, all of the other stuff that had happened the first time around. It was so incredibly, I felt so incredibly powerful. So I felt healed from all of that. And it was just, it's an indescribable feeling. It really is. It really is. But I felt the strongest I had ever felt in my life.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. All right, before we jump off, I want to hear your best advice for moms that are listening and best advice for birth partners.
So for moms that are listening, put in the work, educate yourself and just believe in yourself and know that you can do it. When you have moments of doubt or let negative thoughts creep in, as they will find their way, do your best to flip them around and keep on that positive track. Because, like you say in the course, we were born to do this. We are strong enough to do this. And it's true. You just have to have faith and know your own strength.
I love that. How about for dads?
For dads, know that you can be an active part too, and you don't have to just, go in blindly and not have a role in what happens, kind of like how my husband was saying, be their advocate if you need to, or, just don't be afraid to step in and be the words of encouragement, or, lend a helping hand if they need, support in any way, whether it's physically, emotionally, just be there, lend an ear.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah,
thank you for sharing your experience and your strength. Yeah, it was so good chatting with you. And tell your husband we enjoyed having him on. And thank you for taking care of the babies.
If you loved what you heard today, the very best way to support this podcast and help other moms to find it is to leave a quick review. I read one at the beginning of the episodes, and I would love for yours to be next. And if you're ready for even more pregnancy, birth, and postpartum goodness, come join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I will hold your hand and walk you through pregnancy and birth step by step so you're totally prepared for a birth you'll love. See you next week.